Richard Banks, thank you very much for agreeing to do this video interview for Usability UK. Could you just introduce yourself a little bit, explain what your background is and your interest in usability? Just give a bit of background to people.
Sure. Yeah, I'm a designer by profession. So my undergraduate degree is in industrial design, and my master's was in computer-related design at the Royal College of Art in London. And I joined Microsoft in 1995. And so most of my career has been on product development. So I worked on Microsoft Office for about 5 years, and I've worked on Windows for kind of another 5 years. So very much on kind of shipping, large pieces of software basically used by billions of people around the world. And then about 6 years ago, I moved into Microsoft Research, which is an entirely separate division of Microsoft that has kind of one foot in academia and one foot in kind of Microsoft's interests in technology, if you like. And so now I work in Cambridge in the UK in a team called Socio-Digital Systems. And we do research basically mostly around the home or the domestic situations or close personal relationships or friendship and things like that, looking at issues like how people use technology to communicate amongst each other, or how the change in photography from analog to digital has kind of changed the nature of how they represent their families and friends and those kinds of things. So a lot of my work now has moved away from shipping products to kind of thinking about more broadly about research into people.
Well, I mean, Microsoft's research and development section are sort of legendary, so it must be quite an interesting space to be working in.
Yeah, I mean, we're incredibly lucky, I think. I mean, there are very few kind of industrial research groups left like Microsoft. Xerox famously has had one. A lot of the, I think, industrial research groups have really, as kind of financial issues tighten, have had to push their research groups closer and closer to their business interests, and Microsoft is one of the still has the freedom to do kind of primary research and to pursue to some extent things that it thinks will be interesting, even if they don't coalesce with Microsoft's business goals in the short term. Obviously, in the long term, the goal is to help Microsoft define its future and help Microsoft push ahead, but we're driven by the immediate needs of our business groups. But a lot of the groups at Microsoft Research really are computer science focused groups. They're looking at kind of new forms of programming languages, or what it means to bring massive computing resources to scientific problems, or new graphics processing and graphics algorithms. And there are fewer groups within research that are focused like us on people and on the end user, if you like. And so it's nice to be in this environment where we have a tremendous amount of freedom, but also have a job that day to day puts us in contact with people and allows us to design things for people. It's an odd environment to do design, because when I worked on Microsoft Office, or I worked on Microsoft Windows, I was designing this thing for somebody in the end to use, And research is slightly different in that you're designing things to test hypotheses. So you have a research, can I design that I might put in somebody's house for them to live in for a while to test how they used digital communication tools or whatever. And sometimes the things you might be testing aren't necessarily the things that you might put into a product. You might, for example, deliberately design something to be difficult to use. We might get to that. In order to test things about the way and the nature of design or the nature of technology and things like that. And we haven't done that explicitly, but there's a contrast between what it means to design for research and what it means to design for shipping products. And I've had kind of feet in those worlds.
It sounds you literally are at the cutting edge of usability, things that haven't even been kind of invented yet, already, or unusability, as it sounds from one of your examples there.
If necessary, yeah. I mean, it is. I think the world of usability, in research is different than the world of usability in product development, if you like. Just in terms of kind of how broadly you can think about your domain, if you like, or kind of the negotiation you might have with your product team in deciding who it is you're designing for, so particularly for these large products, getting a team like Microsoft, like Windows, where you're talking about thousands of people who are, play a lot of different roles, from kind of development through to tests, including design, including user research, getting everybody deciding who it is their customer, is quite an issue. And finding a way to kind of fluidly talk about their customer, and for everybody to have a sense who they're designing for, it difficult. I mean, when you're talking about a product like Windows that's used, I think Windows is used by 1 billion people, so, and you're talking about everybody from, some kid at home doing their homework to, IT professional running, 500,000 seats in a massive company, so the scale and continuity of what a user is a problem in and of itself.
Yeah, that's an enormous problem, isn't it? Or an enormous thing to get your head around, just how many people
Yeah.
must be using that product.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think so. Some of the usability tools that I'm sure you describe on a website, like personas and things like that, but which are basically kind of filtered descriptions of people based originally on real people, but they're kind of summaries of people. They're interesting tools in an environment like Windows, because they're based on real research, and they have value because of the detail that are in them about a person, and what their typical age might be, what they might do typically, as a job, their experiences with technology and knowledge, and even personas go on and just can describe kind of family environment, their purchasing, all of these kinds of things. So there is this kind of aspect of a tool like that is kind of pragmatic and gives you detail in somebody's life. But in a lot of large development efforts, just having a representation of a person is a useful tool just in day-to-day conversation. So you might have a persona that called David, that kind of represents somebody with very little computing experience, for example. And the name David starts to become something that is part of the conversation that you'll have with your team, with developers, and you'll be able to say, well, I'm not sure this thing we're designing, this particular feature, is something that David would use, or what would David think of this? So it becomes part of a kind of conversational tool, if you like.
Do you think that's the case with most usability methods and the sorts of things we're talking about? Because I've heard the same thing. Using personas as a one-off exercise has some use to it, but actually when these personas actually permeate into, I've heard of development teams where actually one developer is actually associating themselves with X persona, and suddenly in discussions they're saying, well, actually, what would Patricia say about this, or what would David say about this?
Well, I think the thing is, I think, part of the usability and the design process is about making choices. And the danger sometimes with usability data and usability tools is that they can be used as a form of ammunition, if you like, to support your particular argument. And so I think part of what I'm saying in the piece that's on the website is that you have to find a way of balancing your intuition with what it is that you're learning about real people, and I think that's true with tools like personas as well, that they provide a certain framework, but you have to make sure that framework is fluid somehow, because there may be things, in the end, this is kind of a construct that you've created, and there may be things that you've left out or you've included that you should or shouldn't have, so you've got to be prepared to kind of say, well, actually, this persona may say we should go in this direction, but there are other reasons why there are other directions that we should kind of go in. So these tools can be dangerous, in the sense that somebody may have a really strong, passionate desire for the product to go in a certain direction, and if they can latch onto one of these tools as proof that their choice is the right choice, it unfortunately can end up negating everything else, because it is, a form of data that they can kind of use. So I think of a lot of the issues here are kind of like how you use these tools to push forward the design and development process in a way that's kind of positive, but leaves room for you to be creative, to do things that are unexpected, that may fall outside of what these tools are immediately saying that you should necessarily kind of do.